Welcome back to the Troubadour Show. My name is Kirk Barbera, and today we're going to go through chapter 2 of the Iliad. Now, I call these chapters, not books, although you might hear it called Book 2, and that's just because of a tradition, but I prefer just modernizing it and making it chapters. So if you want to get my version, my translation, a modern translation for first-time readers, go to troubadour.studio/Iliad. In today's discussion, we're going to be going through chapter 2, the pivotal moments with some discussions. We're going to talk about loyalty, prophecy, leadership, and honor. And I'll also give you a Greek word of the day that we're going to be looking at the actual Greek a little bit. So this is meant as a deep dive to help you get a better understanding and enjoyment out of the Iliad. But I will say that I worked really hard. I've been reading the Iliad since I was a kid to really help you just be able to pick this book up and start reading the Iliad for yourself. I stripped away a lot of the stuff that usually confuses people. And we'll talk a little bit about that today. But again, please go check out troubadour.studio/Iliad to help make all this happen so I can continue fueling more of these videos and helping you either understand it, appreciate it, or write that paper, give that speech in school, whatever you need to do. Chapter 2, pull out your Barbera translation of the Iliad. And this has several parts. So my book, one of the things I worked really hard on to help with is I have a description at the beginning of each chapter to help you understand what's about to happen. Now, you may think this is spoiling, but it's not, because it's a tradition of doing this. In fact, when Homer is singing the songs of Achilles and Troy, he is doing it to an audience that knows a lot about the Trojan War cycle, about the gods and goddesses. These are their gods and goddesses. These are their heroes. So he fully understands and expects them to know a lot of the background. You don't. So I provided a kind of blow by blow to help you understand. And then within each chapter are these subsections, and I broke it up, in various sections throughout the chapter to kind of tell you what this is, to kind of give you a grasp of it, because I did want to keep this in verse. So this is in iambic pentameter, but it's very readable. Again, give it a shot. You can get chapter 1 for free at troubadour.studio/Iliad to kind of give you a sense if you want to invest in the book itself. So there are 8 sections in my translation. There's Zeus's deception and the dream to Agamemnon, Agamemnon's test of the Greek army, Athena and Odysseus rally the Greeks, Calchas's prophecy and Nestor's encouragement, preparations for battle and the Greek sacrifice, the Greek army assembles for war, and Trojan preparations and gathering of allies. So we're going to go through this section by section. I'm going to do some readings, but I hope you'll buy the book so you can read it all for yourself. Section 1, Zeus's deception and the dream to Agamemnon. Remember, Zeus is the king of gods, so he's the ultimate ruler over the universe in a sense, and he is going to send a dream to Agamemnon. Agamemnon's the leader of the Greek forces attacking Troy. Now remember, in book 1 or chapter 1, we had a quarrel between Agamemnon and Achilles, and you could watch that video to go deeper into that. But Achilles decided, because of the outcome of that quarrel, he decided to leave the army. So he's still present in the camps, although we don't hear from him for a while, but he's not going to participate in the fighting. And this is incredibly important. Thetis, Achilles' mother, she goes to Zeus to beg him to help support Achilles' claim that he is the greatest warrior and he will have the greatest honor and glory by supporting the Trojans. That means that now Zeus, the most powerful god, is going to back up the Trojans in fighting back against the Greeks. So that's where we left off. Now the question is, how is Zeus going to do this? How is it going to play out? So here's the very beginning of this book. I'll read just this little section. While other gods and warrior men slept deep, Zeus lay awake, his heart too full to rest. He pondered how to honor mighty Achilles and bring destruction down upon the Greeks. At last, a plan formed clearly in his mind. He sent a dream to Agamemnon's tent. Go now, O deadly dream, to where he sleeps, and give him these commands just as I say. Tell him to gather all the Greek forces. Now's the time to take the city of Troy. The gods no longer stand at odds with him. Hera begged us all to end this fight, and Zeus now turns his wrath upon the Trojans. Zeus sends out a dream to Agamemnon in order to test the Greek forces. This is essentially to get them prepared for battle so that they could start losing. Now, he doesn't tell them they're going to lose. He sends a destructive dream, or a dream that brings destruction. So this leads us to our Greek word of the day. The word is basically a destructive dream. Ulaos or ulos oneros. Ulos oneros. Destructive dream, or dream of destruction, or baneful dream. Now I want to make you think about this, because in a few lines later, the word will be used again, but in a slightly different way. It'll be theos oneros. So there's ulos, it's actually pronounced los, ulos oneros, and then theos oneros. Okay, so that's your Greek word of the day. The second one, theos, means divine. So divine dream versus destructive dream. So the dream that Zeus just talked about, he was trying to come up with a plan to destroy the Greeks temporarily, not to completely annihilate them, but to make them lose to the Trojans for a time. So he sends a destructive dream. Now, when it's received by Agamemnon, the dream god comes to Agamemnon in his dreams, gives him a dream. He calls it a divine dream. That is the theos oneros. So just keep in mind that there's a lot of this happening in the poetry of the story. Now, in my version that you can get at troubadour.studio/Iliad, I built that into the story itself. I didn't always keep it exactly as a destructive dream. I built that into the whole verse, which a lot of people do when they're doing these kinds of translations. Okay, so there's your Greek word of the day. And the important thing about this, and why I brought this up, the Greek word of the day, is that it's important to think about who Zeus is honoring and why he's honoring them. So Zeus is going to, and the gods in general are going to honor one side or the other side, one person versus the other person. At one moment, someone's honored. At the next moment, they're dead, right? And this whole issue of being honored is really important. In chapter 1, Thetis, the mother of Achilles, goes to Zeus to beg him to help her son have great honor and glory for all time. That's why Achilles is there, to get the greatest of all honors, the greatest of all glories, where his name will echo through eternity. So some bald dude on YouTube in 2025 will still be talking about this guy. What Thetis does and what she says is very important. The first line she says to Zeus when she finally gets to him is she says, "O Father Zeus, if e'er I've helped you once or ever given aid through word or deed, then answer me this prayer and grant my wish." So she gives a wish. But what's important, and a lot of people miss, "O Father Zeus, if ever I helped you," she's reminding him of a help. Now, what is she reminding him of? People in the time of Homer would have known this story, this prophecy, this idea of what's going on here. We don't know this. Even people I've noticed who read the Iliad a lot today don't really, I think, know this. But so I'm going to tell you something secret that you can, add to a paper or something like that. So there's a prophecy before Achilles is born, before all of this happens, way before all this happens, that Thetis, the sea nymph, will give birth to a child that will usurp the father and basically overthrow the father. Now, in Greek canonical tradition of the gods, Zeus overthrew his father, Kronos, who overthrew his father, Ouranos. And there's a tradition, and Zeus is trying to maintain his power, trying to maintain order. Because when you go through this battle where you have war amongst the gods, that puts all of the universe into disarray, into disorder. And it's a bad thing. It's always a bad thing. Civil strife is always terrible. So you want to maintain order. So what Kronos did when he learned of the prophecy, that's Zeus's father, he basically swallowed all of his kids so that none of them could usurp them. The wife, Rhea, actually put a rock instead of Zeus. So Kronos swallowed the rock, thought it was Zeus. Zeus grew up strong and then eventually castrated his father. And that's how he, and then he fought. There's this big war. That's a whole nother story. But what's important here is that now there's another prophecy that Zeus has had, that the son of Thetis will overthrow the father. Now, Zeus knows there's no way around this, right? He understands that prophecy has to come true. So he is brilliant in his solution. He asks Thetis to marry a mortal. That means that the god or the son will overthrow this mortal, this king, and that's okay. And in fact, there's a lot about, just in mortals, it's not as big a deal. It doesn't have to be the destruction of the universe to do it, although it can be kind of destructive sometimes. So Thetis marries Peleus. Remember the golden apple story? That was our first videos in this series. That whole wedding ceremony where strife threw in the golden apple, Paris had to choose between the three goddesses, start of the whole Trojan War. That was the marriage, the wedding of Thetis and Peleus. Okay, so let's return to our story here. So in chapter 1, what you see if you're a Greek in 8th century BC, thousands of years ago, is you see a man, Achilles, who was destined to overthrow the king of the gods. He was destined to be the god of gods. That was his destiny, essentially. Through a quirk of fate, in the way that Zeus manipulated fate, he was able to place Achilles into the, with a mortal, so that all the prophecy means is that he's going to overcome the greatness of Peleus, which he definitely does. And that's what you see when you're listening to this tale. You hear a quarrel between Agamemnon, this man, fighting with the man who was supposed to be the king of kings. And the injustice of that is very palpable when you understand the whole context of this is like Jesus, this is the greatest, and he's being dishonored in this way. It's like, oh my gosh, so it's really powerful. And I want to stress that so much to the understanding of this story, is that conflict is palpable to the people. And now in chapter 2, Agamemnon is so dishonored that not only is he getting a dream, which is a sign of your honor. If you get a dream from the god, you're kind of a big deal. Not everybody gets a dream to the gods, but he gets a deceptive dream, a destructive dream. So they really don't oblige him. Last thing I'll say on this point. When Achilles begs to the gods, they answer. They do what he asks. Because he's in this line of this prophecy that in this tradition that's been told about his lineage and who he's supposed to be and what was given up for him. So the gods, and Zeus in particular, listens to him. When Agamemnon prays to the gods, they deceive him. So think about that for a moment. When Chrysis begs to Apollo, he prays to Apollo. What does Apollo do? He listens. So Agamemnon is the great king of all these Greek leaders, and the gods do not listen to him. Okay, now the last thing I want to say on this section before we move on, this is back in chapter 2, is I want to point out, while other gods and warrior men slept deep, Zeus lay awake, hammering home the thing we talked about last time. The gods are human. They're very human-like. They're like meta-humans is my analogy. If you know the Marvel DCU universe. They're humans. They have extra powers than humans, and they're immortal. That's the only unnatural thing about them. But they're very much in the natural world. They sleep, they eat, they make love. They are temporal. So when you pray to Zeus like Thetis did, she had to wait for days and he wouldn't get the message because he was over there. I mean, could you ever imagine your God? Like think of your God today, even if you're an atheist, could you imagine God being over there and not being able to get to you for a couple days or get to the person? Agamemnon's test of the Greek army. That's the next section. So in this section, Agamemnon is going to test the loyalty of his men. And this always baffles people. This is always such a weird thing. Because what does he do? He gathers together a small council with Nestor, the wise old man, who's always talking about how wise and old he is. And Agamemnon said, "The time has come to take the city of Troy. But here's my plan. I'll test the Greek warriors by telling them it's time to sail for home. I want to see if they still have the heart to fight for Troy and bring back Helen's name. When I do this, you must stand up and urge them to stay and fight until the end. Now, so he's going to test the loyalty to see if the men, not the kings, so this whole story is mostly about the kings, but we're now going to get a sense of the entirety of the army, that this is thousands, tens of thousands of men who've come here, and we're only looking at the army, at the kings. This is a story about kings. That's what Agamemnon said to the council. Now he's going to speak to the men. Yet how it stings to think that future generations might hear how so many Greek warriors fought for years and years and never won the day. Though we outnumber them, if Greeks and Trojans were to line up in tens, for every man of Troy, 10 Greeks could stand to take his place. Still, we've not taken Troy. It's not the Trojans, but all the other allies from afar that stop us from destroying the great cities. 9 long years we've fought beneath these walls, and now the beams of our ships rot away, our ropes have loosened, and our wives and children wait for us at home. Meanwhile, we stay here, our task unfinished, empty-handed still. Now, as a reminder, this comes from my translation. I hope you hear how great and easy of a read it is. Go to troubadour.studio/Iliad and get your copy today so you can follow along with me. He tells this to the whole Greek army that it stings, they're going to fail in their endeavor. What he wants from them, from the men, and from his kings, but from the men, is he wants them to say, no, we've fought and sacrificed too much in order to give up now. They don't do that. Essentially, all the men run away, like almost immediately, most of the men run to the ship saying, okay, great, we get to go home. Now, what is this saying here? What is the point of this from a perspective of drama and the story of Troy by Homer? Well, one thing it does is it adds a little bit of drama, right? So if, again, think about yourself as the audience of the Greeks at this time. The audience knows that Troy is going to fall. Just like when you see, there's so many stories, like I remember Titanic is a great example. You know, when you see that movie, you know Titanic is going to fall. And in fact, when I was a kid and I went to go see this with my mother, my father refused to go see it because he said, I know what's going to happen. He doesn't want to see the ending. And, you know, Titanic's going to, like, we know Titanic's going to fall. So what's the point of seeing it? Well, that's the same kind of thing here. But what Homer does, just like in Titanic, what the writers and directors do there, is they build drama and anticipation and suspense throughout the story. Now, they do it in that movie, you know, Titanic, by making you fall in love with these two characters who are falling in love. She's, you know, the female is usurping the society she's coming from, all that good stuff. We're not going to get into Titanic. Here, what's happening is Homer's trying to show how close the Greeks came to not taking Troy. So we all know that they are going to do it, but it's like, once given the opportunity, everyone wants to go home. They don't want to deal with this anymore. So that's one, is it serves as a kind of dramatic foil, a suspense builder is one thing it does. It also, again, in the brilliancy of the author and the creator, is it says something about Agamemnon. So Agamemnon's a king who needs to be proven his greatness by the shows of loyalty, which he does not get. He doesn't get. So he just acted the big man with Achilles and lost their greatest warrior, the town sacking Achilles, the only one that Hector was afraid of, who's the great Trojan hero. And he lost him. So now we have this king testing his men and realizing they're not there for him, and they're not there for his honor as much as he thought they were. Now the next section, Athena and Odysseus rally the Greeks. As the Greeks begin to abandon the war, Athena sends Odysseus to restore order, who urges the warriors to stay and fulfill their mission. Now, by the way, what I was reading from is my little section that will help you understand what's going on. My book is really designed to help you, get a first read by yourself, even if you don't want me talking in your ear all the time. Here's a little section, just a little snippet of this section. This is Odysseus talking to the men who are running away. What stirs this cowardice in you? Sit where you are and hold your place in line. You do not know the mind of Agamemnon. He may be testing us, but soon he'll lead our forces back to war upon the Trojans. So he reminds them that maybe he's testing you, so live up to the test. You're not actually going to be able to go home, so you're going to look really bad. You're going to look cowardly. So this goes back to cowardice, shame, honor. To get honor, you have to be brave, which means you have to be at the front lines ready to take action with the hope of eventually the reason you're doing this is to win goods for yourself, have people say good things about you, that you're the greatest warrior, you're the greatest, most beautiful, fastest, strongest of them all. That's what everyone's fighting for. So when you run away, when given the opportunity, rather than saying, no, I'm here to fight and take those Trojans because they took our Helen away from our best of men. That's the system they think they're in, that they are in, and that they're all operating in. But we see little cracks in this all the time, in this little system, this social system, this economic system, as I said, because in the last video, the economy is the goods you get for the honor you've won based on the tip of your spear and the bravery you've had. And we'll see a lot more of this. And this is why Achilles leaves. That's another crack, a major crack in this whole thing. I find this next section really, really interesting. It's, again, these are pretty short sections, maybe 2-3 pages for each section here. This one's called Thersites' Defiance and Odysseus' Rebuke. So Thersites has always fascinated me as this common soldier. The Iliad is a story of the greatest Greek heroes. It is not a story of the common man. If you read the book All Quiet on the Western Front, you'll get a story of the common man, the red badge of courage, story of the common soldier, even in War and Peace, story of the common soldier. They don't have that in the ancient Greek. It's not about the common soldiers. It's about the great Greek heroes and gods. But to flesh out the story and to give you some spice, comic relief, and some narrative understanding, as well as to show you the totality of the story, to remind you that the Greek heroes are the main heroes we're talking about, but there are thousands and thousands and thousands of men on both sides also fighting who are not this. So what he does, Homer, is he tells a quick little story of Thersites. But here's a description of him. I think this is a great description. Really fleshes out Thersites. I want you to envision almost, although it's an exaggerated version, but if you've seen the movie 300, about the 300 Spartans, the one that's in the early 2000s version, there's Ephialtes. And this is kind of like him. He's the common soldier, but he's not only a common soldier, he's a common soldier who's not nearly as strong and capable and powerful as the king. So it's a contrast. But one man still refused to hold his tongue. Thersites, always full of bitter words, would challenge kings with insults cruel and sharp. He had no sense of order, only rage, seeking the laughs and scorn of all the Greeks. That's important, by the way. Think about that for a second. Seeking the laughs and scorn of all the Greeks. So he's a comedian. He was the ugliest man who came to Troy, hunched over, limping with uneven legs. He bore his shoulders low across his chest, and his head was bald, with just a few thin hairs. He hated both Achilles and Odysseus, but now he turned his scorn on Agamemnon, shouting complaints aloud to all the Greeks as everyone grew angry at his words. So here are some of his words. I wanted you to hear some of this. So one, notice that he's not tall, strong, square-jawed with a big, fluffy beard coming out like the Leonidas beard from 300, with chiseled abs. That's how the Greeks saw their heroes, by the way. Just look at their sculptures. They're like the actors in the movie 300, just absolutely perfect human specimens. They are the grandest, the tallest, the most muscular, the fastest, the most powerful, and intelligence. There is intelligence there. And there's a term we'll try to get to later, although it's more relevant in the Odyssey. So here's what Thersites tells to Agamemnon about this test and, going back and forth and everything. Why, Agamemnon, are you always mad? Your tents are filled with bronze and captive women, all chosen from the towns that we have sacked. Do you still need more gold, another prize, another slave to keep your company? You take the best for yourself while we fight. A leader should not treat his men this way. You're nothing but disgrace to us, the Greeks. Let's go home, leave the war, and leave you here so you can sit and count your shining spoils. And he goes on, but I'll stop there. So what is happening here, and this is an important point about the story, is you have a man who is clearly a dishonored. He's clearly not a man of honor. He's not an Achilles, an Odysseus, an Ajax, or even an Agamemnon or a Diomedes. He's Thersites. He's a bum. He's a common soldier who is probably very incapable, not a great fighter. He's just one of the fodder. And he's mad at Agamemnon because Agamemnon and all the Greek kings really get all the spoils while he gets nothing or very little scraps. Why is this included? This is to emphasize the honor system that they're all working in. That's one reason that Homer includes this, as well as having a comic relief. And it says something very important about the Greek culture that we really don't understand as much anymore. Although I think some people might, depending on where you are. In our culture today, especially today, not just like America over the last couple hundred years, but America today, is comedians reign supreme. And there's something really interesting in that. So in the ancient Greeks, comedy was always way relegated, way beneath the grandeur of tragedy and the Greek heroes. And this is kind of a sign of why, because one of the things that comedy does, even today, is it's mostly about pointing out the flaws in the system, about attacking. So comedy and laughter, you always laugh at something, which means you belittle it, you bring it down. I will put my own little tidbit on this. I think there is something really problematic about a society that's too comedic. Now, there's a value that comedy has in the sense of showing the hierarchies that we, and the society that we live in, and silly things about it that may exist, especially when those things are genuinely silly. But there's a real problem when everything is funny and that there's no reverence, you can't admire anything because anything you admire is going to be laughed at. And that's kind of the society we live in. I think it's problematic, and we're seeing a lot of problems with that. So while there is a value to having someone pointing out some of these problems, what Odysseus does later, then with his staff, Odysseus struck him hard upon the back and shoulders, and he dropped, hunched over as his tears ran down his face. I'm not saying we should do that to our comedians. I like comedians. I go to comedy clubs. They're funny, and that's always a wonderful thing. But I do think we need to kind of, in our society, my personal view is we need to knock down a notch a little bit. We need more of the tragedy, more of the greatness, more of the grandeur. And the Greeks had no qualms with knocking down the comedian. The next section is Calchas' prophecy and Nestor's encouragement. Now, the important thing here is just the idea of prophecy and how it plays out constantly throughout the story. One, we have to remember this is a story being told by a bard where everyone knows the ending. So that means prophecy is easy to build into it. We don't really have prophecy in our stories anymore. What we have is foreshadowing. I think that's kind of the equivalent. So prophecy is kind of saying, well, look, we know what's going to happen. We don't know how it's going to happen or when it's going to happen or who's going to die in the process, who's fated to die. But we do know that Troy is going to fall. And so do we have the will it takes to go forth with that? So that idea of, what's going to happen, but do you have the will to pursue it, the individual will to pursue it? That is somewhat of a pretty Greek concept here that's really focused, is living in this world of fate, of not having control over what's going to happen. What is the role of your own free will in that? So Odysseus, again, wisely trying to keep everyone together and trying to get the army to fight and get prepared for fighting without Achilles, he reminds them of the prophecy by Calchas before they left for the war. When they were back home in Greece, there was a prophecy. At Aulis, where we gathered all our ships to bring this war to Priam and to Troy, a sign appeared to us, sent down by Zeus. A serpent, blood red, fierce, and full of rage, appeared and slithered up a towering tree. It found a nest upon a lofty branch, where 8 small baby birds lay safe and still, and one poor mother sat above them all. The serpent ate the babies one by one, as their mother cried and flapped her wings in pain, until it ate the mother last of all. And he goes on. Then he says, Odysseus ends, "So why do you stand in silence, Greeks, amazed? This sign is sent by Zeus, the king of gods. Just as the snake devoured the birds all 9, so we will fight for 9 long years in Troy. But in the 10th, we'll take the city down." So Odysseus is reminding them of this prophecy and to continue on. Now, here's the important thing, is this has all been set up by Homer as they're preparing to be defeated. So the Greeks are about to be defeated. Remember, so the dream has been a deception to get them started into this battle again so that the Trojans can win. Why? So that Achilles can be shown to be needed by the Greeks. And that's what's happening here. But in order to do that, you need to keep the war going, and that's what Zeus does. So the next section is preparation for battle and the Greek sacrifice. So here Agamemnon orders the troops to arm for war, and the leaders make sacrifices, praying to Zeus for victory despite his silent plans for further trials. Now in this section, we're not going to go over much of it, but I just want to point out a couple things. One, you get some actual sacrifices and how sacrifices work. And they literally, it's almost like a play-by-play on how to do an ancient Greek sacrifice. And how you kill the right type of animal, how you put the right kinds of meat, how the smoke goes up, and the gods like, ooh, I like that smell. So for some reason, we give the gods the smells and we get the foods, but that's enough for the gods. And this is part of the building of that story within the Greek cultures, that's a good thing, is that the gods like the smell and that's all they need. Now, the next section is a rather famous section, but for a kind of dubious reason. And it's called The Greek Army Assembles for War. And what this is it's an arrangement of not all, but many of the warriors and the lands that they come from. So it's almost like a roll call of all these different warriors, kings that came to Troy to fight for Helen of Troy to get her back, right? To fight for that honor. So it's this huge roll call. Now, here's what I did with this. One, I shrunk it down a lot, so I took a lot of liberties on only this section. Of the whole Iliad in my version that you can get at troubadour.studio/Iliad, I only took the real serious liberties here. I truncated this immensely into basically a little longer than a sonnet, like just a short amount of lines to kind of give you an idea. If you want the totality of it, I did include what is called the catalog of ships. I included that in the appendix. So you can go all the way to the back and you can read the whole thing. It's multiple pages of just roll calling this person from here and this person from there. Now, why did Homer put this catalog of ships? That whenever I've taught this, everyone always says is boring. So boring. Well, one, I don't think it was boring to the Greeks at the time. What I think was happening, this is my assessment. I think of it as like if you go to a mega concert where there's a pop star who's touring the world. One of their songs sometimes mentions your city. And sometimes there's even songs that are purely about all the different cities they've gone to. And these are really big hits a lot of times because it's like, oh yeah, Denver or Austin. And he mentioned San Francisco, New York City, but he also mentioned some small town in Ohio that he likes or something like that. And it's this whole litany of these places and people you know. And that I think is what's happening here. Is this is kind of like wherever this story is being told, it will always resonate with someone because they can say, oh yeah, that's my people's. Oh yeah, I'm from Corinth, right? And there's the Corinth people. And so that I think is the main reason why this is included. It also gives you a sense of scope. So it shows you the amount of men who have come to this war to fight for the Greeks. And it helps you to, have fleshed out characters. Some of them are going to die. Many of them are going to die throughout the story. So it kind of is an introduction to that. So I want to take this opportunity to point out something that is often a huge barrier to the enjoyment of the Iliad. And a lot of great literature, this is something that happens all the time as a barrier. And that is the massive array of characters, of places that you are completely unfamiliar with. Now, in my version, I did truncate a lot of this. So, for instance, I never refer to the Greeks as Achaeans or Argives, which in almost every other translation you're going to get. The Greeks are the Greeks, no matter where they come from. That's just for simplicity. The Trojans are not the Danons or anything like that. They are the Trojans, and that's it. But there is a reality where there's all these tribes on the Trojan side that are fighting, and there's all these tribes on the Greek side, and they're all from different unique tribes. They're not really a Greek nation at this time. But for simplicity, I just didn't include that as very much. There is indication of these various tribes, but I tried to make it simple for your enjoyment so you could just get into the story. That's one, is like there's all these different places that you're unfamiliar with, and there's all these different people. Now, this is true if you read lots of great literature. War and Peace, Don Quixote. There's so many stories that if you read great canonical literature, there's hundreds, sometimes thousands of characters. And it's like, it's overwhelming. And you don't know what to do with all these characters. And that's definitely true even in my version. If you read my version, you're going to still hear the lands of Pythia, and that all these different lands will still be there. But here's my advice on reading great literature and how to do it without becoming overwhelmed. Who cares? You don't need to remember any of these people. The people and places you need to remember, Homer will make sure you know them. You're going to know Achilles. You're going to know the Myrmidon. You're going to know Patroclus. You're going to know Agamemnon. You're going to know Odysseus. The Thersites, the Plaiasones, all these characters that are filling out the works, you don't need to know them very much. If they are there for a moment and they're out the other ear, that's okay. Same thing with War and Peace. War and Peace is very much like this. This is the understanding that really helped me get through this and enjoy great literature, is it's just like real life. So when you go to a new high school, like I moved to my high school outside of San Antonio when I was a sophomore, so almost 16 years old. I was a sophomore. I was moving to a new place. I didn't know anybody, and it was a big high school. Even by the end of the 3 years, I knew a fraction of people that I could recall off the top of my head. But I had met hundreds of people throughout that time in my classrooms and different activities and events. I couldn't name any of them. That is how life is experienced. As you go through life, you meet lots of people. You're like, oh yeah, I think I met you once. And that's the same thing in literature. You do not need to worry about 99% of the names or places. So if you just read them, keep moving on. The author will make sure you know the people and places you should know. That's it. So that's what you need to remember. It's just, don't worry. When you read my version, because I know you're going to get it, there's still going to be a lot of these tribe names. There's still going to be a lot of the names of different characters, and you're not going to know most of them. It doesn't matter. The ones you need to know, you will know. Okay, there's my rant and my advice on how to get a lot out of great literature without feeling overburdened. Now, to end that point, the last section is Trojan preparations and the gathering of allies. This does not get as much screen time as the Greeks do, but it's still important and it still is relevant to all the allies. So earlier, Agamemnon mentioned that the reason that they've been so difficult in sacking Troy is not because of just the Troy and the Trojan army. It's because of all the allies that have come to Troy's defense. All the allies in their area come to Troy's defense. Here's an example of a name that Homer will make sure you know throughout the story. If you don't remember it right away, it's okay. He'll remind you later and he'll give you examples. The Trojan tribe, the Dardanians, marched strong, led by brave Aeneas, son of Aphrodite, born to Anchises in the hills of Troy. With him were Antenor's sons, skilled in war, Archelicus and Acamas, both brave and bold. And it goes on and on. All you need to know is one name. And if you don't know that name, it's okay, because Homer will tell you it again later in the book over and over and over again. The name, by the way, is Aeneas. Aeneas is the name in that list that I just read to you. That's the only name you need to know. The other names you don't need to worry about, other than they're just, people that are there to remind you of all the loss of life and the things that happen in war. Okay, so that's my discussion of chapter 2 of the Iliad. I hope you enjoyed that. Again, support what I'm doing and the project I'm doing by buying this book. This is the best way to do it. Buy it from my website because I get a much bigger percentage of that. So do that. Go to troubadour.studio/Iliad. There's a way to buy it internationally, and you could buy in the US. So there's different ways. It's not an ebook yet, but it will be coming soon to ebook. So please get the print book. That's for me the best one, especially right now. So go check that out. Follow along. I'll do chapter 3 very soon, and I'll see you next time.